All right, guys, today we're going to be looking at the last strategy we typically use to solve quadratic equations, and that's the quadratic formula. So first and foremost, it'd probably be good to write it down. So when you're finding the answers to quadratic equations, it's always x equals something at the end. So our quadratic formula is something you can use to find answers regardless of what your quadratic looks like. So it starts off with x equals, and then there is a song with it, but let me write it out first, and then you'll capture me on video singing, and I'll hate it, and that's okay. So negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So in typical fashion, the song goes with pop goes the weasel. So you write, I hate this. Okay, x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So if that helps you remember it, go for it. If not, you can just memorize it like a normal human being. Okay, so a couple things to keep in mind when you're using your quadratic formula. So I always go through and identify what my a, b, and c value are before I begin. I plug in a, b, and c using parentheses. So anytime I plug in this b, I put parentheses around it. We simplify as much as possible before breaking up the plus minus part. This simply means that one of our factors will use addition and then one will use subtraction, and that will give us 2 answers if there are 2 answers. We simplify our entire numerator before I use the denominator at all. And our answer could have 0 options, so there could be no answers, or we would say imaginary answers, 1 real root or 2 real roots, okay? So let's do this example. It might be good to actually keep that up there so we can reference it. Okay, so from here, when we solve our quadratic equation, and if I'm specifically using your quadratic formula here, you can always try to solve it using any of our other methods first as well. But our quadratic formula will always work. It just typically takes a lot of writing, so people don't like to use it. So in this scenario, our x squared has an a value of 1 because there's just the number 1 in front of it. B is the number negative 5 because that's in front of our x term. And then c would be negative 14. C is our constant. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plug those values into this formula. So we get x equals negative, our b value is a negative 5 plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times my a value, which is 1, times my c value, which is negative 14, all over 2 times my a value, which is 1. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start simplifying. So my negative 5 becomes a positive 5. Plus or minus. Now I like to plug all of this stuff into my calculator. That's underneath the square root. This piece, if you remember from Algebra 2, is called your discriminant. And depending on whether this is positive, negative, or 0, that determines how many answers you have. So if I just go ahead and I still have my square root, but I'm going to go ahead and plug all of that stuff into my calculator, everything I circled. So I'll do parentheses, negative 5 parentheses squared minus 4 parentheses 1 parentheses, another set of parentheses, negative 14, and parentheses, enter. And I get 81 all over 2 times 1, which is 2. Okay, and so then now I'm going to go ahead and see if I can find the square root of 81, and I can in this scenario. You may not always be able to, but if I do in this scenario, I get x equals 5 plus and minus 9 all over 2. And now because I have this, I have just a number plus or minus another number all over 2, this is where you're going to split it up into its 2 different options. So one option is when you use the addition symbol, so 5 plus 9 over 2. And then another option is when you use the subtraction symbol, 5 minus 9 over 2. Okay, so 5 plus 9 is 14 over 2, which is 7. And then 5 minus 9 is negative 4 over 2, which is negative 2. So my 2 x-intercepts, or my roots, or my solutions to this quadratic equation are x equals 7 and x equals negative 2. Okay, and that's how you use your quadratic formula. So if you would like to go ahead and try these next two, feel free. And now I'm going to work through them. All right, so in this one, it set equal to 0 first. Awesome. I do notice I have a GCF, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that GCF out front. And then I'll get x squared plus x minus 6, right? Because we think of it as dividing by each of those by 2. All right, and so now I'm just going to work with the inside part, my quadratic part, and I'm going to use my quadratic formula. So that means my a value will be 1, my b value will be 1, and my c value will be negative 6. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times my a value. Excellent. Okay, so minus 1, so it's negative 1, plus or minus, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stick this entire piece into my calculator. So when I do that, I'll do parentheses 1 parentheses squared minus 4 times parentheses 1 parentheses, and then my last set, parentheses negative 6 parentheses, I get 25, so it's the square root of 25 all over 2 times 1 is 2. And then I check to see if I can actually take the square root of 25, and I can. I get 5, so negative 1 plus or minus 5 over 2. And then so now I just have a number plus or minus a number all over another number, so I can go ahead and I can split up into my addition and subtraction separately. So negative 1 plus 5 over 2, negative 1 minus 5 over 2. Negative 1 plus 5 is 4 over 2. Negative 1 minus 5 is negative 6 over 2. Whoops. So my answer is 2, and negative 3 would be my factors for that one. Amazing. All right, I am going to try to do this problem, but I'm actually going to have you scribble it out, and I want to give you an example of another type of problem. So sorry if you already attempted that one on your own. Go ahead and find some blank space to do this next problem. So go ahead and write this quadratic formula, or excuse me, quadratic equation here. Negative 5x squared plus 3x plus 7. I'll set that equal to 0. Okay, so this one's a little different. So I check and there's no GCF I can pull out. My a value isn't 1, so you could try a reverse box method here if you would like. But again, I'm showing you how to use a quadratic formula, so I'm going to go ahead and use a quadratic formula with this one. And I'm just going to give myself a little bit more space here. So I can go ahead and identify, first and foremost, my a, b, and c values. So a would be negative 5, b would be 3, and c would equal 7. Okay, so I have x equals negative b plus or minus square root. Oh, that's going to be usually way longer. B squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start writing out our simplified version of it, right? So we get negative 3 plus or minus negative 3 square root, and then I'm going to be putting all of this stuff in my calculator. Of course, you can try mental math on any of these. I highly recommend it, but I'm just going to double check because I need my video to be correct. So then we got 149. Wow, not in that color, we don't. So 3 squared minus 4 times negative 5 times 7 gives me 149 all over 2 times negative 5, which is negative 10. Okay, and then I try to, same way I try to square root 25 over here and get 5, I try to take the square root of 149. And when I do that, I get a gross decimal. I get like 12.206, etc. And so you're actually done here. This is a perfectly acceptable answer for the answer to a x-intercept or quadratic formula, excuse me, for this problem because you can't take the square root of 149. So anything beyond that, if you tried to do it, you would get a decimal answer, and a decimal answer is an approximation. And so we like to be as exact as possible in pre-calc. We did learn in Algebra 2 that if you could break down what's underneath your square root more, so for example, if I was going to try to break down, say, like 42, I could break down 42 into 2 times 21, and then you could break down 21 into like 3 times 7, and so on and so forth, and then find your pairs. So that's still a good skill to have, especially for SAT and stuff like that. But for our purposes, it's perfectly fine if you get to this answer, because this shows me that you know how to use the quadratic formula correctly. You've correctly applied it, and you found the rational answer, or excuse me, irrational answer. So if you try to take the square root and you get a decimal that's not a nice number like 5, or up here we got square root of 81 was 9, and so on and so forth, then go ahead and you can just stop there. Okay. If you do the optional delta math, which I highly recommend because it's all about your quadratic formula, some of the problems will simplify all the way down into, so your answers might be like 7 and -2, but some of your answers you'll have to leave like this, and they will provide you with notation pieces that allow you to do that. So go ahead and try that. You can also work on the practice problems as well. Thanks, guys. Wait, before I forget, so for some reason the notes like double printed, like an extra copied. So this is the last you have to try. Anything beyond this, you can just like scribble out on your notes. Okay, now we're done.